You have people such as Kavita Krishnan and Nandini Sundar. They have glorified Naxalites, glorified Maoists, right? On paper and officially. Okay, so you have those speakers. Then you have other speakers who have basically either disparaged Hindu deities or disparaged Hindu customs. So you have Meena Kandaswamy, who basically said that in a poem that Sri Rama is a D head and who was sexually impotent. So he couldn't satisfy Sita ji. So Sita ji sent him to get the testicles of the deer and hunt it and bring it back so he can arouse himself. This is the kind of nasty stuff and graphic stuff that she has said about it. And she also compared Hindus to the Taliban.
Namaste everybody. Welcome to Citti Media. My name is Citti, your host. Just a day after from now, we have a major global event. I'm not talking about Ganesh Chaturthi. I'm not talking about 9/11. We have the event of Dismantling Global Hindutva. And in order to explain better about this Hindu-phobic event that seems to have created waves in the international media, we have the president of Coalition of Hindus of North America, Nikunj Trivedi ji. Nikunj ji, thank you so much for joining us.
Namaste, namaste.
Namaste ji, how are you and how's everything in America?
Busy. Abhito is very busy right now with all the things going on. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But yes, quite busy. A lot of organizations are working together on dismantling Hindu phobia versus dismantling global Hindutva.
Right. So how would you define the event? Let's begin with that. And what, according to you, are the objectives of it?
Yeah, so right around middle of August, we found that this event was being publicized as it's titled Dismantling Global Hindutva. If people don't know, if you haven't seen the flyer has, sort of Hindu figures that are being plucked out with a hammer and from the roots. At the bottom, there are roots. And the flyer said supported by 40 plus universities and departments and things like that. So that triggered the entire Hindu community because essentially what we saw this as an attack on Hinduism because of the history of the speakers. And I'll talk about the speakers themselves in a bit, but also more importantly, how universities themselves are institutionalizing Hindu phobia. We're okay with people who are individual scholars or professors wanting to do something like this. Fine, we may not like it, but it's their freedom of speech. But when universities actually institutionalize the Hindu phobia, when they are supporting it, even departments, right? That's where the problem comes in. So with the Hindu community quickly galvanized and lots of organizations got together, they started, I'm on like 50 WhatsApp groups just for this conference. Right. And then, not to mention like emails and things like that to galvanize efforts to reach out to all these universities. So students, parents, alumni, community members, donors, everybody started to make calls. We sent 1.2 million emails, so 12 lakh emails were sent between all the organizations and even more maybe, but this is the organizations we know. 150 organizations signed a letter that was then sent to the universities, 150 organizations from US and Canada, all the large temples, so it's not some, small group doing this. It's probably the largest galvanization of Hindu American and Hindu Canadian community around this conference. So that's what was going on. Now, let's talk about the speakers, right? Because people say, well, this conference is against Hindutva, it's not really against Hinduism. So I'm going to talk about this for a minute or two as to why that is not really the case.
Sure.
First of all, the speakers themselves have a history of openly glorifying terror groups, okay? Within the United States, both the Maoists and the Naxalites are considered terror groups according to the US State Department. So you have people such as Kavita Krishnan and Nandini Sundar. They have glorified Naxalites, glorified Maoists, right? On paper and officially. Okay, so you have those speakers. Then you have other speakers who have basically either disparaged Hindu deities or disparaged Hindu customs. So you have Meena Kandaswamy, who basically said that in a poem that Sri Rama is a D head and who was sexually impotent. So he couldn't satisfy Sita ji. So Sita ji sent him to get the testicles of the deer and hunt it and bring it back so he can arouse himself. This is the kind of nasty stuff and graphic stuff that she has said about it. And she also compared Hindus to the Taliban. So what's going on in Afghanistan? She said, if you want to understand what's going on in Afghanistan, just look at the RSS in India, right? It's a completely different comparison and completely unwarranted comparison. But now you have to understand, when you are looking at Hindus in America, most of the people in America don't even understand Hinduism. Okay. So now you all of a sudden have this like comparison of a very falsified comparison of terror groups. And remember, this is also happening on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, right? The worst attack on American soil. So what they're trying to say is that, global Hindutva is apparently a bigger problem than Taliban, Al-Qaeda, etc. So that is the context of this conference. And that's why the Hindu community is so upset and vehemently against this. It's nothing about freedom of speech or anything like that. It's more about the fact that this is the context of where this is happening. And that's where the problems that we see. And that's where the opposition is coming in.
Nikunji, you bring up two very important points. And if I may just ask you a follow-up on that. One is that you already addressed this. It's about the freedom of speech issue. And of course, that sort of applies to the other side as well. So you're doing your bit, what you think is right about right or wrong about the entire event. But what some people are telling within the Hindu community and well-wishers of dharmic people is that by galvanizing such support, by gathering such momentum, by giving these people the kind of traction that they don't deserve, you are sort of legitimizing the use of Hinduphobia, wherein Hinduism is not even a religion by means of dharmic practices, right? It's supposed to be a way of life. It's supposed to define our civilization. So what do you have to tell to these people?
Yeah. So you have a few points that I would like to reconstruct here. The first one is that, why give these people, kya hai, chalega, let it be, why give these people the more visibility? The problem is that what most people don't realize as they're sleeping sometimes is that this has been legitimized for the past 30 years. Okay, 30, at least that I know about. It's been more. If you go to today's departments, right, Indology departments, and again, India might be a little different. I don't live in India, so I don't know. But in the Indology departments, in the South Asian departments, Hindu dharma is always looked at as this exotic, erotic, sexually deviant, violent religion that is really like bizarre, right? That needs to be dismantled. And I'm not kidding you, because I have empirical evidence of this. And there are many studies that have happened about this if you go back even 30 years. So that is very important, that this is what is now happening, is that because of social media, because of YouTubes and all these different things, these groups are essentially legitimizing hatred. And there is a real consequence. Just recently, there was a data that came out that attacks on Hindu Americans have increased 500% in 2020. Okay, that's a big number. Then on top of that, when you look at students on campuses, right, the moment they say I'm a Hindu, right, they have to disclosure. It's like a 10-page disclosure that they have to sign saying, I don't support this, I don't support Modi, I don't support this, and all kinds of things. What the heck does that have to do with being a Hindu?
Yes.
And finally, what these people have done is last year, they used Holi, the festival of Holi, to launch their campaign called Holi Against Hindutva. Can they use a different religion's festival?
Right.
Probably not, right? So why continue to use and disparage Hinduism? So some people say, kya yaar chalta hai? But you know what? We don't take it, because for me, I have Sri Ram in my mandir, right? Hindu temples have Sri Ram, Sri Krishna, Sita Devi in temples. And we cannot be that hypocritical that are having deities who we worship every day. And then you have people who are saying all these things. Not just that, but they're making it academic. You see,
right.
If someone just says things, they're stupid, yeah, you can ignore them. But the fact that they're academically saying this and they want to include this as a study manual in pedagogy, right? That is the problem.
Right.
You see, that's really the critical part of it.
It's actually the symbolism behind this. And like we were discussing that it's right on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 attacks. What do you think this sort of symbolizes? And do you think there had been a pre-planned agenda in order to execute this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They have been working on this for months, not just today, right? If you look at what Professor Audrey Truschke and Ananya, I'm forgetting her last name, but
Right.
she's from Georgetown as well. So some of these folks, part of the South Asian Scholar Activist Collective, what they did was they launched this Hindutva harassment manual, right? This is supposed to be a manual that is to be used by academics and others to protect themselves from the Hindutva swarms, right? But the resources, and this is a silencing of Hindus. So essentially,
Right.
anybody who says something, including scholars, right, says something against them, oh, these are Hindutva, silence them. Second thing is the manual has references of people and groups that have openly called for dismantling of Hinduism. And I'm not kidding you. That is, and you can look at our website. We have if you go to kona.org/crying Hindutva, we have a response to that. And we really show how dangerous this stuff is. But that has been continuing. So what they're trying to do is legitimize this idea that Hindutva is this biggest monster in the world that needs to be dismantled. Is so dangerous. Is probably more dangerous than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, you name it. Okay. Now we can go into debates about what Hindutva is and what Hindutva isn't and all that stuff separately. Not for this one, but the point is anybody who raises their voice against a mischaracterization, a false translation, and an open disparaging of Hinduism is being labeled as Hindutva, right? And only they say that they have the right to define what Hindu Dharma is and what it is not, because they are apparently some academic, and practitioners don't matter.
Right. Nikunji, addressing the definitional issue. Now, I was doing a little research, especially to understand what the other side of the spectrum is sort of telling about this. I read the most important websites in the world, the biggest media houses. And the common ground, the commonality in most of these arguments is that it's a Hinduism versus Hindutva debate. Of course, this has been going on for a while, but it's sort of amplified right now. For a much more younger audience, which has been convinced that Hindutva is different from Hinduism, what would your message be?
You need to study and do research. So I'll give you 3 examples. The first usage of the word Hindutva. Okay, first of all, it's a Sanskrit word. So if people who are familiar with Sanskrit, it's a sandhi, Hindu and tattva, right? It's a combination of 2 words. The essence of being Hindu, that's what it really means. Shaktitva, Shaktitva means, the essence of Shakti. There are many different words like that, right, in our Sanskrit language. So Hindutva is like that. Number 2 is the first usage was by a Bengali poet to describe the traditions of Hindu Dharma as Hindutva, right? Second usage was then followed up with Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. So it continued to use. And then finally, Veer Savarkarji used this in defining sort of this geography of India and the concept of Hindutva in his book. So there is a multitude of definitions. What they're trying to do, just like what they're trying to do, is they're trying to reduce any of these categories into singularity. Okay. So they're saying that, okay, singularity, Hindutva only means violent political movement and blah, blah, blah. But they're not looking at this. Bharat Sevashram Sangha, which is a very important movement in Bengal, and there's a mandir right here in New Jersey. They have a book, okay, of mantras and bhajans and things like that. You know what the book's name is? Om Hindutvam. Okay, so now you see how the word Hindutva is being used. This is a native usage of the word. Can it have multiple usages and multiple names and definitions? Yes. And that's what the message for me as far as what Hindutva is. Look at the multiple definitions. You cannot pigeonhole that word into just one definition given by the Western world. Often we look at the Western world to legitimize our culture. We should look at our own words. Last year we fought a big battle here on swastika.
Yes.
If you look at today, you can do research. Okay. If you go and do research and on Google and other places, what are you going to find? The swastika is Hitler's symbol.
Yes.
Correct? Now, I can say, hey, I did the research and now swastika is supposed to be a Hitler symbol. But can you tell me as a Hindu, you would accept that? The answer is no, because the fact, not only that, but at the same time, Hitler never used the word swastika in his main camp and other things. So that's a research we have done as well. So just like that, we are in charge of defining our words and our practices, not the Western world that has always been hostile. If you look at colonization of India, the British always had a very severe disdain for Hindu practices, right? That's the original word. That's the original origin of Hinduphobia. But anyways, the point is, coming back to Hindutva versus Hinduism, the word Hinduism itself is a Western construct, right? For us, there are different words, Sanatan Dharma, Hindu Dharma, etc. So we have to own our own words and say, you know what, you don't get to define us. We are going to define. We have many different meanings of the word Hindutva. and we will look at all of those on our own terms. Don't tell us, don't pigeonhole this, because that's exactly what they're doing.
Right. Absolutely. And I hope a lot of people do hear your message about this. This brings me to my last question, Nikunji. Now, you are in the land where, Swami Vivekananda, who had traveled across India and whose philosophy was emanated in Chicago, and Hinduism was introduced in a very positive sense, and that sustained for a very long time. And now, with the top-down approach sort of being handled by the academia and the left intelligentsia in America, it sort of posed a very great challenge. Now, what do you think can supplement the Hindu intellectual discourse in America, and what do you think is the future of this?
Yeah, I mean, the Hindu community is now finally rising up to the challenge and seeing the open disparaging, right? There has to be, like, see, when, in the milk, jab pani, jab doodh ubhar jata hai, and, when the milk comes to boiling and it comes out, that's where I think the Hindu community is now finally understanding. And I actually thank this conference for galvanizing it, because this conference has done more good for the Hindu community in a way than anything else has, because now people are actually waking up and understanding the challenges. Number one. Number two, more and more Hindus need to be involved in the process. See, people cannot talk about us without us. Okay, this is really important. Right now, what is happening is people are talking about us without us. But in other religious practices and groups, that doesn't happen. So Hindus need to be involved through the academia, through activism, through voicing, through donors, through chaplaincy, many different aspects, so that there is an equal voice. We're not going to say that we're going to shut down all discourses. I'm sure people have things to say about the Gita, that it's a violent book, and this, but there should be enough counter to that and saying, you know what, that is not the right opinion. Let us give you the practitioner's opinion, and here's what it is, right? We cannot just keep crying, saying, oh, they're saying this, or they're saying, no, what are you saying? There's a saying called the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So we have to be the squeaky wheel also, saying, hey, look, this is our tradition. We are going to define our tradition. Nobody else gets to define it. Academic exercises aside, we need to make sure that practitioner voices are also included in this particular discourse.
Right. Nikunji, before I conclude, I have one last question for you. Now, Hindus in America have always been considered a modern minority, although I hate that term. But in that sense, the impact of this particular conference, how do you think the Americans are seeing it?
Right. So frankly speaking, most of the Americans are most people are sympathetic to Hindus because they have seen the community contribute positively. Yes. Whether 30% of doctors in America are Indian or so, things like that. You see Indians going to NASA. Many things are happening, right? And I'll come to the model minority in a second. But most of the people are supportive of what the Hindu community is feeling, right? It's just that there's a loud minority of people on the other side that is trying to take away the discourse and legitimize it through academia. And because what happens is, if you legitimize it in academia, generations of students, generation of people who are going to learn about Hinduism in a different way, right? About India in a different way. And because of the geopolitics going on in India, this is amplifying even more, right? There's a very strong current that wants to dislodge the current government and replace it with some other government. So there's politics behind it too, that is being supported by a nexus that is hell-bent on making sure that happens. But that aside, my concern is not that. My concern, that is Indian people will take care of that, right? My concern is more about what happens with Hindus. And I think by legitimizing these types of things, that is the problem. But the majority of Americans really are sympathetic to what goes on with Indians and Hindus in general, right? That's number one. But now let's talk about the model minority second. See, that model minority idea is a very actually dangerous idea, because it just assumes that you have to be in this box, okay? That you have to be the nice person. You're always going to be successful. No, Hindus and Indian Americans in general come in many shades, right? You have very poor people who are not able to make ends meet. Even in America, you have that. And you have the super rich people who have a lot of money, right? So you have that. So we're not just the model minority, like in that sense. There are many different shades of us. And also model minority, this idea of model minority is a very Western construct, which just says that, you can only succeed this much. You have to be only
Yes.
the model minority. You cannot challenge the majority, or you cannot go beyond a certain amount. So there's that limiting factor. It's almost kind of racist in a way. So I don't like the word model minority. I'm not a fan of that word. So I just wanted to share that also.
Right, absolutely. I'm there with you in sentiment, 100%. Nikunji, all the very best, and I hope there's more and more support to whatever you're doing. I'm sure the entire country, if not the entire Hindu community, is with you on this. Thank you so much for taking out your time. Namaste.
Namaste, and thank you for providing us a platform.
Absolutely. And I really hope you can join us time and again.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Anytime.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Namaste.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.